A word of warning before we get started. This episode is about childbirth, and as such, there are a few gory details. We talk about termination and fertility and infertility, and it may not be suitable for all audiences.
Hello and welcome to Not Without My Sister, a podcast about us. I'm Rosemary McCabe.
Oh, I'm Beatrice McCabe.
And we're really glad you're here.
We are so glad you're here. We're super appreciative of everybody listening to us, and we'd also like to ask that if you have a friend or a sister or a...
If you have a friend like Beatrice does, only one.
Excuse me.
Listen, if you have a friend, a colleague, someone you know, and you think, you know what, they'd love that podcast, please tell them. Unless that person's name is Claire McCabe, because she has told me unequivocally that she is not enjoying the podcast. I am to stop cursing. There is to be no mention of sex, and I'm embarrassing her.
I would like to say, as I said to Rosemary when she forwarded me, actually, in fairness to you, Rosemary, like this week you were actually a little bit concerned. Mom, she was actually upset by the fact how upset you were, and you sent me the text and said like, oh, should I actually stop doing whatever I'm doing? I was like, no, you know what, Mom, you need to get a grip, because like Jermaine Greer, although she's like slightly questionable nowadays.
No, you didn't say Jermaine Greer.
No,
you said Gloria Steinem.
But I'm about to say Jermaine Greer, although she's questionable now, at the time when she started was like extremely relevant, and her mother, I'm sure, was horrified, just like Gloria Steinem's mother was, I no doubt, horrified. And look at those women, trailblazers. Although I actually probably shouldn't have said Jermaine Greer, because very questionable nowadays. But anyway.
Yes, I do think me talking about my crotchless knickers on a podcast is very comparable to Jermaine Greer's work, early work. So, yeah.
Take that, Mom. You didn't invent them. How about Mom takes up a case with Rihanna? She's the one selling the crotchless knickers. Right?
I've never heard you say more Irish. How about she takes up a case with Rihanna? She's the one selling them. Do you remember Rihanna?
She is, in fairness.
Do you remember Rihanna started shooting that music video in a field in Northern Ireland?
Oh my God, that was amazing.
And the farmer was so horrified by the scantily clad dancers, and he made them stop.
That was amazing.
Oh my God, it was so good.
That was Mom. Maybe Mom owns that field. She just never told us. And in her will, it'll be like field in Northern Ireland, made famous by Rihanna. Crotchless. And I like the way also that, what is it? WhatsApp corrects crotchless to crotchless.
I don't think that was WhatsApp.
Words.
I think that was Mom.
Oh, that was Mom. Sorry, Mom. Mom, I'm appalled as well, just so you know. So this week, Rosemary, you thought we were going to talk about weddings, and I was like, no, we're not. We're going to talk about babies.
I don't get to make any of the decisions around here.
You make all of the decisions. I said, do you agree? You said yes, therefore it's your decision. So we're going to talk about babies, right? Or like giving birth, or like the act of having babies. Not necessarily like babies, how great they are.
Sorry, I thought we were going to talk about like babies and having babies and like deciding to have babies and stuff. And now all of a sudden we're talking about the act of giving birth, something I know nothing about, so I'm just going to interview you.
No, Rosemary.
Is that it?
No, exactly the topics you just discussed. And also, like, I hate to break it to you, I've had birth, I was about to say. I've given birth, but like, I still know nothing about it, which is probably...
What, did you have your eyes closed the whole time?
No, but like, honestly, I feel... Actually, last night, lying in bed, I was thinking to myself, I literally know nothing about this. Nothing. And that's the whole problem. Like, that's the whole problem, though. Like, it's an extremely different experience for everybody. There is no one rule for anybody. It depends on your doctor. It depends on the information that you have on hand. It depends on, you know, the circumstances that you go into this birth with. And like, and it's all very like, when you get there, breathe. Like, I had a doula the first time, you know, I had a doula, and it was like, she was very helpful.
You were living your best New York life.
Well, I mean, she was very helpful, but at the same time, she wasn't very helpful, because only over time. So I've given birth 4 times, right? Each of those times I've been induced. So I've never had that Sex and City thing where like your waters break.
You didn't splash onto somebody's shoes?
No. I never splashed onto anybody's. Well, I mean, I don't know though. There's something to be said for, you know, giving birth naturally. I think again, having never done it, I don't know, right? But I imagine that it means that your body is actually saying, I'm now ready to give birth.
Yeah.
Whereas being induced means the decision is being made for your body, right?
Yeah.
So like every single time I went into hospital, like they give you Pitocin or they give you whatever they give you to induce birth in you, right?
I have a question. Mm-hmm. Why were you induced? Like, what was the logic in your case? As in, I know why some people are induced, but I'm wondering.
I just never gave birth, right?
So you went over with all of them?
I was at 42 weeks with Nash. So it's like 40 weeks is like the point at which you're supposed to, like, is the full term, right?
Okay.
So I went 42 weeks with Nash, and then they brought me into hospital and they were like, we're going to induce you today. And I was in New York at the time. And Don and I went in for this appointment because it was like, at any point we're going to induce you.
I have another question. Mm-hmm. Did you have your baby bag packed?
No, I didn't.
Did you not have? Oh my God.
Oh, no.
Have you watched? No. I just want to say, have you watched these videos?
They told us to pack it.
I watched a blogger doing a baby bag, and she put the outfits for the baby into Ziploc bags, and then she wrote on them like what day they were for and what was in them for her quote unquote hubby. I'm quoting directly.
That's nice. You know, we shouldn't judge, right? That's nice. Genuinely. If you're, like seriously, if you're that organised, good for you. I was not.
No, but like my point is, sorry, if you're having a baby with somebody who needs labelled Ziploc bags of this, these are the baby clothes.
But like
maybe,
you've also never had a baby. Maybe you do need those things.
But like, would you not just pack the bag together instead of being like, I packed this for my
hubby?
Well,
I packed the bag. I did have a bag packed. You are correct, actually, now that I think about it. But in that bag, I had a couple of baby grows. I had PJs. I had like the literally like barest basics.
Do you have a magazine?
Fine. No, I didn't.
I kind of would imagine you get a lot of reading in.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't get any.
I mean, I would have
in.
imagined as well.
I got no reading in.
Okay.
So this was in New York, and I was at Beth Israel Hospital, and I have to tell you,
that sounds very celeb-y.
It was not.
Oh.
It felt extremely like what am I trying to say? It felt like war. It felt like a war hospital. It was really, really, really gritty, really grungy, but also like my experience there was really bad. Like from my perspective, I went in, sat in the waiting room. I was like, hey, I'm here to be induced, and I went into the whatever like delivery room, and they this was at 11 p.m. and they were like, oh, we're going to give you Pitocin. So they gave me Pitocin, which is the...
Sorry, 11 p.m. Could you not be like, can we wait for tomorrow?
Well, that's, you know, obviously they have an opening.
Shit, go on.
So they give me the Pitocin. At 11:45, my baby pops out, right? So, I mean, I have to think like at the time, it was horrific, right? It was so fast. It was so unexpected. It was not what I was... There was blood everywhere. They left like all of these... like blood-filled napkins everywhere. And they left us there for 4 hours with the baby. Of course, the baby, like we were delighted, like here is our baby. We're here with our baby. But like I was literally on a stretcher, on a gurney for 4 hours with just blood and like guts everywhere. And it was hideous.
Can I ask a question also about like, so you were living in America now. Mm-hmm. Did you have health insurance?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I had insurance through my work.
And how much did this, like, was this covered by your insurance or were you paying that on top?
It cost me about $1,000, right? It cost me about $1,000, the whole thing. But it's cost me a lot more since. Like my number 3 and number 4 cost me about $3,000 and $4,000 each. Because a friend of mine lives in Utah and she recently gave birth and she had hired, I think either a doula midwife, and her plan was to have a home birth and everything was going well, and but she'd been labouring for something like 13 hours or something, like something obscene. And she ended up going into hospital and they were basically like, no, we're going to have to induce her, or else, I can't remember if she had, but anyway, she now has a $15,000 bill. Oh, well, my doula was separate though. I paid for my doula.
No, but her doula midwife was $3,000, but she has a $15,000 bill from hospital. Well, just like giving birth in America is wild.
It depends on your insurance plan, right? It's totally different depending on company to company, or if you're self-employed or whatever, like it's entirely arbitrary. So anyway, that was the first baby. But I also think like that my first, and I couldn't breastfeed and all these things. It was disaster, right? Like I just couldn't. But my first...
Well, your milk never really came in, true?
No, there is like... And I went to the doctor. So after Nash was born, I really struggled. I was very depressed. I was very down the dumps. And I remember Don's mom was there for the beginning of that. And I love Don's mom. Like we have a great relationship, but she kept saying like, get out of bed, just get up out of bed. And I didn't feel like, physically didn't feel like I could. It wasn't like psychologically, but I didn't feel like I could, right? And then mom was there and mom was like, come on, let's go for a walk around the neighbourhood. And I found it so painful. But not having any benchmark or like any
context.
idea.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I thought this was normal, right?
Sorry to keep interrupting, but I do think it's important to say that, like, I think a lot of the time when it comes to giving birth, we're really, like, as women, kind of told, of course it's going to hurt, but then you'll have your baby and you'll be grand. You know what I mean? It's, you know, so there is this kind of like, you'll be in pain, but there's no like how much pain is acceptable and like at what point can you go, no, like something's wrong. And I think it's really hard to know because you're supposed to be so grateful that you have this baby.
And that baby's healthy, right?
Exactly.
And I remember at a certain point, so it was after about 10 days, I was like, there's a terrible smell coming from me. Right. I was like, there's a, like, really, this is not, is this normal? You know, I was like, I don't think, and I was also in agony, in absolute agony. And we didn't have a car or anything. So I went back, I called my doctor and I went back to my doctor. And he's like, oh, you have a terrible infection. He goes, you're like extremely infected. And he goes, well, we don't really have time. I don't have any anesthetic. So like, let's just rip these stitches and like, let's sew you back up. Because he was like, oh, whatever happened with the stitches, like, this infant got infected.
Is just like in the doctor's surgery that he's like,
yeah,
oh.
But I'd also been an hour on the subway. That was the other thing. So like sitting down had been incredibly painful. But the thing is, you know that after you give birth, sitting down will be painful. Going to the bathroom will be painful. All these things. So it was like I didn't know what was a normal. This is not normal painful.
Because logically you're like, oh my God, this like I've just given birth to this enormous skull.
Yes.
Of course it's going to be painful. Of course I'm going to be in pain.
And yes, exactly. But 2 weeks later, like I was thinking this is really bad, right? Like this seems like, you know, mom seems to think I should be up and running around and Don's mom seems to think I should be looking delighted and I feel miserable and I feel terrible. So I went back and he was literally like, and I thought he was a great doctor at the time. He was my first doctor, but in hindsight, he was a very good doctor. I don't think he was great at
maternal care.
Yeah, or just understanding that this was like extremely traumatic. And also I couldn't, so I got a lactation consultant to come in because the baby screamed the whole time. And I was up every night. I was reading, what's it called? The Good Little Baby. What's it called? My cousins recommended it to me and it's called like the Well-Behaved Baby. I can't remember. And it basically says like, here are the things you should do. And everybody who does it swears by it. Oh, amazing. And I was like, I'm a failure. And if you go online as well, you know, literally everybody is like happy to tell you, you are a failure. You're an absolute failure.
The Happy Baby book, is that it?
The Contented Baby, isn't that it? Something like that. And literally everybody, you know, I couldn't, I was breastfeeding him and I wasn't producing enough milk and I was. And
but you like, also didn't know this at the time.
No, I knew I wasn't producing enough milk because he was crying all the time. But like every time you go online, it's like, of course you can. You're made to produce this milk. Of course you can. And when I went back to the doctor, I said, like, I really don't think I'm producing enough milk. And he goes, of course you're not. He goes, 50% of women don't. What's your problem? Why is this your expectation? And I was like, how would it not be my expectation?
I've never heard that figure before in my entire life.
Who's ever told me that? So then I call mom and I'm like, Mom, like you never, also I was also shocked by this fact of like you bleed for 6 weeks after you have a baby. Like you literally have a
nobody tells you.
Period. I go, Mom, what is this? Like you never told me. She goes, nobody ever told me. What are you expecting? How was I supposed to know? Nobody told me either. I'm like, well, you could have told me. That would have been extremely helpful. So the whole thing.
She hates talking about periods.
Yeah, but all in all, I just felt very isolated. None of my friends had kids. I was definitely the first of all of them, you know. But then the next couple of times I went and I had kids, I realised I feel like
it's so funny that like you've had 4 kids. So you talk about it now like you went like you're going to the supermarket. Like the next couple of times I had kids.
But the next time I went, I said, you know, I didn't realise that it was up to me, if you know what I mean. The next time I went, I said, they were like, oh, you're going to be induced. And I said, okay. I said, well, I'd like to be induced over 12 hours. And they said, okay. Nobody even said to me, would you like to be induced over X hours? Never, ever, ever did anybody ask me ever in any one of these 4 experiences, ever ask me what I would like or how I would like it to happen. I
would never have known you could that you could delay induction like that. I thought it just...
I said, I'd like the Pitocin to happen more slowly. I would like this to happen over 12 hours. I would like this to be a more slow experience because I was thinking, you know, is it normal? Like for most people who go into labour, their water breaks, they give birth. You know, it's like their body starts to prepare and their body
steps,
gradually gets ready for this. Whereas my body was told in 45 minutes, give birth. You know, like it went from 0, as they say, and here they like to talk a lot about like how open you are and how open you're not. And
dilated.
Yes, and I'm like, I'm not really into that. But that's, I think, probably the Irishness or the Claire McCabe in me. And
I can never really figure it out. Is it, you know, when they say you're 8 centimetres, is it like 8 centimeters in diameter or 8 centimeters side to side?
8 centimeters in diameter.
Because I'm always like, but that sounds massive.
Yeah, well, it is massive
I mean,
regardless.
it is massive,
but like
yeah.
literally, I went from 0 to whatever it's supposed to be, 10
The size of a head,
in
basically.
45 minutes,
Yeah.
right? And you just think to yourself, like, of course that body's not ready. Like, of course you're going to tear. Of course you're going to be ripped. Of course you're going to do all these things.
And did you have an epidural?
I had an epidural every single time. And also, this was the other thing nobody said to me. Maybe this epidural isn't going to stay. So every single time I had to have 2 epidurals, because the first time I would have it and I was like, I still feel my legs. They're like, you don't. And you think you do. And I'm like, no, I do. I feel my legs. And they're like, you don't feel them. Do you feel this? And they would kick a needle and like stick it in my legs. Yes, I feel this. Oh, she feels her legs. I'm like, I still feel this. I don't know why you don't believe me. And then afterwards, somebody said to me, one of the doctors goes, oh, it's quite common for people with like red hair or reddish hair to absorb,
To have a higher pain threshold, higher resistance.
No, to have a
yeah.
resistance to
Anesthetic.
anesthesia. And it was interesting because I also have the same thing when I go to the dentist.
Well, so do I. That's what I was just about to say. They always have to do it twice.
Yeah.
To me, when I'm always like, I can still feel that, and they're like, no, you can't. I'm
So
like, no,
be
I can.
aware that if you ever have a baby, you will probably need to have 2 epidurals.
Oh no, I'll be giving birth naturally.
It is still natural, Rosemary. It's
know,
still
I'm
natural.
trying to
I
annoy
hate to
you.
break it. It still came out of my, sorry, mom, vagina.
But you know what? Like me even saying that, I think there's such a weird
There's
focus
such a weird
and
competition.
no.
There is,
but
though.
Yes. But what I was going to say was there's such a weird focus and onus on having a birthing plan, which almost assumes that you're going to have control over it. When for at least I'd say 50% of women, if not more, you don't.
Well, I remember
you
my
don't
doctor
get
said
to do
my
everything you
doctor
want.
said to me, if you have a birthing plan, I'm not the doctor for you.
I've heard a few doctors say that.
But I also think that makes sense because like you can't control it. But I do think that there should be an awareness of like, here's what these things mean. Because to me,
Yes.
it's shocking that if you're a doctor, like that all these doctors who obviously induce people regularly never once said, would you like to be induced over 1 hour? Would you like to be induced over 6 hours? And and the point was that when I was induced more slowly, those recoveries were amazing.
Much better.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Like literally within 4 or 5 days, I was like, oh, I feel great. I feel fine. I can walk around. I can go to the bathroom. I can do all these things that like the other ones that were more extreme and more traumatic to my body were like 2-3 weeks and just like
shock,
but
yeah.
mentally shocking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mentally like terrible.
Yeah, there have been a lot of discussions, like especially around the campaign to repeal the 8th, there were a lot of discussions about women's agency in birth in Ireland or kind of lack thereof, and talking about how, say, in maternity hospitals in Ireland, you'd have a time frame where they'd go, each woman gets 2 hours or whatever, like, you know, or 10 minutes. Like, I actually have no idea what it is, but you'd get a time frame. So therefore, the amount of choice you can have is very limited by, we need to get you in and out of the delivery room within X amount of time. But it's interesting that you're saying that it's similar in America, because I kind of would have thought that because in America they're going to, like, obviously if you're in hospital for 10 hours or you're in hospital for 30 hours, you get charged more money. You know what I mean? So like I would have thought that they would give you way more options, given that it's a paid service rather than a public service, if you know what I mean.
But I mean, it's a paid service either way you look at it, right? Like they're all paid. You know what I mean? They're all charging for
the people, you mean,
yeah,
like the staff.
Yeah, like it's a paid service either way you look at it. I just think it's I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's interesting that we're looking at situations, and like, again, I'm sure if you're a doctor and you listen to this, like, please don't judge us, that you look at the amount of C-sections that are becoming more and more common, like that there is, to your point, like there's more of an onus to get this done and
get
move
in
on,
and out,
you know,
yeah,
like that it's not always necessarily, and like the selective C-sections, you know, because like C-sections are actually really obviously invasive and traumatic, and like to do something like that because you want to deliver on a certain day. And I mean, I'm not saying that's why most C-sections happen, but there is in America, certainly there's a like, I'm going to have a C-section so that I can be on this day, you know, versus I'm going to be induced so I can be on this day.
You know what? I think that's also in America a lot to do with, I mean, there's just, my theory is that it's to do with maternity leave as well. That if you choose a date and you go, either I'm going to be induced or I'm going to have...
be induced, right? Yeah.
Yes,
exactly.
But I mean, also, if you're induced, it's still a little bit unpredictable because the baby could come in 45 minutes, or you could still end up taking a little bit more time.
Certainly, but like at the end of the day, if you have a C-section, oh well, that's actually true. If you have a C-section here, you actually get extra maternity leave, but like yes, but only something like an extra 4 weeks, so not anything major.
Oh, but you're
not allowed to lift your baby for like 6 weeks, you know, just like in Ireland.
But if you have a C-section, and I'm not sorry, I don't mean to be sounding like I'm promoting C-sections, but if you have a C-section, you know how much, like, you know your recovery time more or less. Whereas if you're induced, you don't.
No, I mean, I would not necessarily. I mean, I feel like the C-section is so longer, the recovery time.
Oh,
the
yes,
C-section
yes, but
weeks of recovery.
But at least you know. Do you know what I mean? So like you can plan for it. That like, I do think there's a certain kind of, I know I'm going to have to go back to work after 8 weeks or whatever, and you know it's going to take you 8 weeks to recover from the C-section. Do you know what I mean?
Not really, but like I get what you're saying. But I also think that the return to work time here is really challenging for people. Like I have friends who are extremely senior in their roles and extremely talented, but at the end of the day, they can't afford to decide, you know, they just can't afford to lose 6 weeks pay or 12 weeks pay, because you get 6 weeks actually paid. And then
And is that paid at your salary? Or does it depend on the company?
Do you know what? I can't 100% remember now, but I think it's paid. I think it's 6 weeks paid at your salary, 1 week of which is deferred. So it's 5 weeks paid at your salary. And then after that, it's like a portion of your salary paid to you, you know. And not everybody will give you like 6 weeks guaranteed leave. Beyond that, it's at the discretion of your company. And if you're in the top 10% of earners in your company, I think I said this in the podcast that I did with you, it's at the discretion of your company. Now, I've never heard of a company deciding that you were too important, that you couldn't have
the 6
maternity leave. Yeah. But that is a right that they hold, you know, that if you are that important to them, that they could decide you need to be back tomorrow. Like you need to have the baby and then be back on Tuesday kind of thing. But I have friends who have been extremely senior in their roles and like who have had to decide that they need to be back in 6 weeks, because even though they're senior, like they just couldn't afford to support their families, and they're the breadwinners. They couldn't afford to be back, like to not be back at work. And I just feel like the idea of being back after 6 weeks, because if I think about Nash, who was my firstborn, and I don't know if you touched upon it earlier or not, but he at about 6 weeks or about the 3 month mark, we had a scan, and the doctor said, you know, he has a cyst in his stomach. Looks like he has something wrong with his stomach. And she went off, and you know, it's really awkward. It's really awful. Like it's that moment where you're having the regular scan, and the scanning technician kind of goes, and then they leave the room, and then they come back.
They get a second opinion.
Yeah, they get a second opinion. Then the doctor comes in. The doctor came in. The doctor said to us, and at that point, Don and I were in every scan because it was our first baby, right? And afterwards, like Don was like, "It's all up to you. It's grand. Like you can go to most of them." And he came to a few, but like the key ones, but not everyone. But they came in and they were like, so it looks like your baby has a cyst in his stomach, and it could be nothing and it could be something. But if you'd like to think about termination, then you can think about it today. You know, if you do it tomorrow, then that's going to be totally fine for you. And we were just like shocked, because obviously, of course, they're giving you your options. But as a person who's thinking you're having a baby, to just be told like, we're seeing something on your stomach and now you can have a termination if you want, was like so bizarre. Right?
But also as an Irish person.
Well,
you're coming from a culture where that would never have been an option at that point.
Well, yes, but having never had a baby in Ireland, it was more just the lack of, I suppose. And again, I thought this doctor was really great and had a great bedside manner, but in this case, this was a different one. This was a she. I felt like she was just missing that moment of like the recognition that this in your mind was a baby, you know, that this in your mind had hopes and dreams attached to it, you know, and they're like, so we see a small lump here, and if you'd like to terminate that lump, you're like, I'd like even 2 seconds to even process what you're telling me, you know. So that first pregnancy for us was an absolute nightmare. But I just feel like it's funny because I think pregnancies are so personal to people who are having them and so abstract to the people who are not having them, you know. What do you think? Like, I mean, obviously you have not had a baby yourself, but like you've lots of friends who have babies, right? And you've probably been more of a sounding board to them than I have, because I feel like my friends who are having babies are all in Ireland and they all have their own friends to chat to. So I don't think I've been that person for them.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I don't think I've been that person for my friends either, because so there was one of our friends who had her babies kind of before, you know what I mean? So like her oldest would now be about 6, whereas a lot of my other friends have maybe like 2 and 3 year olds, you know what I mean? So she had a baby before anyone else. But I think she didn't talk to me really about childbirth or about her baby. And I think because none of us had kids, do you know what I mean? So she spoke to her sister, she spoke to her cousin, like somebody who had context for it. And now I think as my friends have all started having babies around the same time, they're more sounding boards for each other, which has definitely been a source of not envy, but like there is a kind of a sadness to it sometimes where I'm like, I would love to be more involved. And I feel like I'm automatically excluded because I don't have kids and because I haven't been pregnant and I haven't given birth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I think that's a little bit difficult. But I also understand because like, especially so say 8 years ago, if you'd asked me, I would have been like, I definitely don't want to have kids. I'm not maternal at all. I've no patience, all of which are probably true, except for the not wanting to have kids. Like now, as I've got a little bit older, not even as I got older, I think probably when I turned about 31.
It's just life. You know, like I literally all my life was like, I'm never having kids. I'm never having them. I don't want them. And I'm fucking for them.
You know what it is as well though? Like, we mentioned this in a previous episode, but I don't feel like I have any hobbies. I don't particularly love traveling. So I think I started to think at one point, like, what am I going to do with my life if I don't have kids? I'm going to be so bored. I'll be sitting at home, like, rereading all the same books
I've
already
read.
Kids
to, like, distract me.
To entertain me, yeah.
But then they don't entertain you. They just
they do sometimes.
drive you nuts. No, well, do they? Well, you do love some of them. You do love some of them.
Yeah. But basically when I decided, or when I kind of had... It wasn't really that I decided, it happened very gradually where I kind of suddenly started going, maybe I wouldn't mind if I got pregnant. Maybe I imagine if I got
pregnant. But I feel like that's normal. Right. I feel like
totally.
I feel like so many people are just like, absolutely not. Get these absolute knobs away from me. And then you're like, you meet somebody you like, or you
It just takes one good baby to make you think,
that's
wouldn't
exactly
mind one of those.
Right.
Yeah, maybe I just met a whole lot of shit babies.
And you're not even, you don't witness the sleeping patterns of this baby, so you see only the good of this baby, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you had witnessed the sleeping patterns of my babies, you'd be like, because I mean, I'll tell you, Nash, God bless him, didn't sleep at all because he was not being fed enough. And when that lactation consultant put him on the scales, she was like, oh, we've just watched him, like you feeding him for 45 minutes and he is 0.1 ounce heavier than he was when he started. She's like, that's not good. Meanwhile, then Bo gets born and Bo's like literally in a coma from 9 p.m. till 9 a.m. Heaven child. And then Chance is born and he does not sleep until he is 2 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And then his baby brother is born, at which point he falls into comas. And his baby brother, who is now 2 years and 3 months old, still does not sleep through the night. So it's been 5 years and 2 months and I have not had a full night's sleep. And yet I look this young and delectable.
That's beautiful. Anyway, what I was saying was, I think when I kind of started talking about, I think I actually might want to have kids and like this
Sorry, back to you.
Yeah, back to me. This all coincided very unfortunately with kind of the breakup of a 5-year relationship, and I had like recently decided I wanted to have kids, and then I think my friends all got very sensitive. You know what I mean? So like they all knew, oh shit, like Rosemary's gone through this breakup. She's now single. She's also unfortunately decided she wants kids. So like they especially then didn't really talk to me about it. You know what I mean?
Rosemary, would you think about, okay, now admittedly you're hanging out with Brandon, right? So it's not like...
hanging out with...
Yeah, you're hanging out with Brandon. But like, would you have considered... I mean, when I was living in New York... That's the wine. Rosemary's opening the wine again.
Jeez, get on.
It's me drinking the wine.
They know it's you.
Oh, do they? When when I lived in New York, a lot of my... I was about to say senior colleagues. It makes them sound like they're 90.
They probably were. They probably were in their 30s at the time and you were in your 20s.
No, they weren't. They were in their late 30s. A lot of... Actually, they were not. I'm being nice. They were in their early 40s. They were where I am today. What was I just watching? Oh my God.
Oh my God.
No, Rosemary.
You were about to ask me something about my life. Now all of a sudden we're talking about you.
Today is October 31st, Halloween, and I was watching Addams Family and I Googled Morticia Addams to see how old she is. She was 40 in that movie and I am
look great.
About to be 42. I'm older than Morticia Addams.
Yeah, but she looks younger than you. What are you surprised about? Listen, to get back to whatever you were saying there.
Bint.
Would I consider? You're going to say, would I consider freezing my eggs? Which I find one of the most annoying questions people ask me.
Oh, well, I was about to say more. I was more about to say she was swooning over her husband in a way that I'm sure Don is like, you should be swooning over me like that. Anyway,
Nobody
yes, you're correct.
Over the husband like that.
But yes, I was going to say, would you freeze your eggs? And then I was remembering that you had that whole TV thing where you went to freeze your eggs, etc. And I was like, would you like to comment on that, Rosemary?
Managed to reduce significant moments in my life to that TV thing. So,
I would like all of our listeners to realise that Rosemary, although she is smart, she's intelligent, she's witty, she still does that terrible finger mark quotation thing on a regular basis. I'm actually impressed that
you can't do it. Your fingers are not coordinating. You're trying to do like the bunny ears quotation marks and your fingers are going at a different rate. Oh my God, I'm going to make a gif out of this. You cannot do it.
Why would they do that at the same time? What is wrong with
Oh my God.
What is wrong with my fingers?
I mean,
my fingers
I've never seen this before in my life.
My fingers are malfunctioning. What's going on with my fingers? Why
I have taken a video of the imbecile in the corner and I shall turn it into a GIF and put it on our Instagram. Okay, Beatrice.
They're working.
They're not. Shall I answer the question?
Yes, please, Rosemary.
What happened with that TV thing? So, I'm just going to wait for a silence. A couple of years ago when I worked at Stellar magazine, around the same time that I think I had decided, or I'd started to think about maybe I wouldn't mind having a kid. I got asked to do a thing for TV3. I think it was for Ireland AM or something, where they basically wanted women. They wanted two different women who kind of were on TV3.
Oh, were there two women?
Yeah, I think there were two or three of us, but I don't know who the other people were.
I thought it was just you.
No, I think there were a couple of us.
Okay, good.
I'm not actually sure, but they wanted us to go. They were having somebody on from this clinic in Dublin to talk about freezing your eggs. And so it was this clinic that you could go and have your fertility tested, like have your ovarian reserve tested. And
your
then
ovarian reserve, is that actually a phrase?
Yeah. How many eggs
have
left?
I find that offensive. Is there a similar phrase like your testicular reserve?
No, because men have testicular reserves for days. Hugh Hefner still has them. Anyway.
Yeah, but like they may not always function. Like sometimes it's not always the fault of the woman.
No, but like
Fault
this is
being the wrong
basically,
word.
I mean, like what I gather from my very rudimentary understanding of medicine and science, very rudimentary, is that it's just they usually test the women first. They're the ones with the eggs, and it's kind of an easy first test to do to go.
Or maybe they're the ones that it's easier to test first because they're the ones who are normally thrown on the front lines. Anyway,
But like they're also the
Yes.
ones women I think are more likely to volunteer themselves up for this kind of testing, whereas men are like, it's not my problem.
Actually, 1,000,000%. But go
Anyway,
on.
so they wanted women to come in and have their ovarian reserves tested and then go onto the show to talk about the experience of it and what the results said and blah, blah, blah. And I basically went and had my reserves tested. And I remember a nurse called me a couple of days later and I was in the office and she called me and she basically said, we've got the results. And it was like random.
She told you this in the office?
Yeah, on the phone.
Did she say like, would you like to have this conversation in private? Or
I mean, she was on the phone, so we were in private ostensibly.
Yeah.
But I think she said, "Is now a good time to talk? Would you like to wait?" And I was like, "No, go ahead," because I also was like, I've never this has never worried me. I've never thought about it. I also had that stupid thing where, like, I think when I was a little bit younger, I was always like, maybe I'm infertile because like I've never got pregnant and I've always been very lackadaisical.
Yeah,
you
but
know
you
what I
know
mean?
what? So I always thought that I always thought that I would have trouble conceiving.
And clearly you did not.
I did not.
And you've never had your ovarian reserve tested, true?
I have not.
Anyway,
I should.
Anyway, so your one rings me, says, "Are you okay to talk now? You know, would you like to wait?" And I was like, "No, it's fine." And she basically goes, "Okay, so your test says that you have." I can't even remember what the test is called, but it's basically like they give you a number, right? Random, like could be 4, could be 15. I can't remember what it was. And she goes, "You're showing a number of blah blah blah." And I said, "Okay, so what does that mean?" And she said, "Well, for your age, we would expect a higher, like I think it was a higher number." And I was like, "Okay." And she said, "So it basically shows that you have the ovarian reserve that we would expect from a woman in her mid to late 40s. And so I immediately was like, okay. And then like burst out crying.
Oh.
So I'm like crying in the office. Thank God my big boss wasn't there. But like, I think Kirsty and Linda were there and they were like, "Oh my God, what's like, you know, are you okay?" So basically what she said on the phone was that what it showed was that I didn't have as many eggs as I should have. Which, oh my God, I don't know why I'm getting upset about it now.
Rosemary, it's all right. It's all right to be upset.
I know. And she said basically
but
that...
also, well, hold on. I'll talk for a second.
No, I want to talk.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So she said basically that women are born with the amount of eggs that they'll have forever, which is mad. When you have a baby girl, she's got all her eggs inside. So weird.
Yeah.
They're born with all the eggs they'll have forever. And then she said with mine, they weren't able to tell at that point if I had been born with fewer eggs than is average, or if they were just dying quicker. So she was like, basically, I think she was saying it's slightly more worrying if they're dying quicker, because by this time next year, blah, blah, blah. So she was like, you know, we would recommend that you strongly consider freezing your eggs. Now, she's also from the egg freezing clinic.
Excuse me. This was also at your desk in the office. You were still having this conversation.
Yes. So she was she was actually very nice.
Oh, I'm sure she was, but I'm more I think you like to have been in an office, like,
yes,
like
totally.
in another room.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think I said, like, what would you recommend? She's like, well, we would recommend freezing your eggs. But the thing is, I've suffered from depression now for over a decade. So I think about, or like I've been diagnosed for like over a decade. I have been on medication for like the better part of that decade. I have not been on hormonal contraception because it totally fucks with my brain, as it does for so many women.
Yeah.
For years, right? Yeah. And so I'm kind of going, I don't think I would actually be able to survive the hormones that it would take to. So you have to take hormones to like increase your egg release, or your egg, not production is the wrong word. So you have to take hormones firstly, and then you have to take hormones when you're having your eggs removed, and then you have to take them again when you're having them reimplanted. And I was just like, I don't think that's not something that I think I would ever be able to go through and survive. You know what I mean? So I was like, that's just not an option for me. I did have my ovarian reserve tested again a year later. When I went for another free thing, when I got invited in for like an executive health check with Charter Medical, where they basically do everything and they're like testing you for everything. And part of it is like they do a DEXA scan to look at your bone density, and they also do your ovarian reserve, and I'm sure there are other things for men. The result that we got the next year showed that they weren't dying quicker. I just was born with fewer, if you know what I mean. But then, so the doctor that I spoke to that day, I actually loved her. She was amazing. She was talking to me about how she loved turning 60, or like being in her 60s, I think, or maybe in her 50s, because she was like, men totally ignore me now. It's very freeing. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, sometimes I'm down in the cafe down the road, and like, honestly, she's like, the men behind the counter will be flirting with the woman ahead of me, and I'm just so bored on her behalf, and they'll just practically completely ignore me. It's so wonderful. I was like, oh my God, it's actually gas. And then she told me as well that we were talking about my weight or something, and she's like, oh, so you weigh this and your body fat percentage is this. And I said, yeah, I know it's too high. And I was like, I can't be arsed dieting. And I was like, you know, I don't really hate my body anymore. And she went, well, of course you shouldn't hate your body. It carries your brain around. I was like, love her. Anyway, but she had said to me, she was like, the thing is, you may have like a lower number of eggs than is expected or than is average for your age. She said, but you only need one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She was like one egg getting fertilized, that's all you need. You don't need, like, the number of eggs doesn't make it any more likely necessarily kind of thing that you will actually end up getting pregnant. So that was a comfort. But anyway, the like long and short of it is, no, I wouldn't consider freezing my eggs, and I don't think I would go for artificial insemination either, because now I have Brandon, who I'm hanging out with.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, artificial insemination, I mean, like, part of it as well was just, I was like, I could never have afforded that.
Sorry. I wasn't asking at all about egg freezing. I was asking about artificial insemination.
But I think you have to take hormones for that too, because it's kind of like IVF, the implantation. Like, they don't just do a turkey baster.
I meant, I didn't even watch that movie with Jennifer Aniston. I more meant, though, like, on a, intellectual basis, would you want to do artificial insemination? How would you feel about it?
I think I feel weird about it now that they can be traced.
Well, I read an article in the New York Times that I will share that was very interesting. That was like this one person talking about how, was it a he or she? I can't remember. I think it was a he. And he said his moms, I think it was two moms, had used artificial insemination to have him. And then over the years, they were very, like, kind of liberal or very free with their information about where he came from. And he then went and searched out where his siblings or like co-siblings could be, or whatever. I don't know, co-siblings, I think is a word I just made up. But his siblings or whatever. Sorry.
We should actually just change this to be called Not Without My Co-Sibling.
Oh, well, not without my co-sister. But it was actually amazing. Like, the article goes, like, it showed all of the various siblings that he tracked down, and there were like 26 of them or something. And I found it an amazing article, because I was like, how would you feel? How would you feel? I don't know. And like so many of the boys looked so alike and so many of the girls looked so different.
Well, I don't want to lower the tone now, but I did read an article in Take a Break magazine several years ago.
So lowered.
Where they were talking about siblings who had either been adopted or who had been born to different parents in that similar way, who met much later in life and ended up falling in love.
Oh, well,
because they liked the look of each other's faces.
Rosemary, there have been multiple cases, and Don will tell you, in Florida, as only yesterday Don was saying, if you could just Google your name, your birth date, and the word Florida,
and the words Florida man.
Oh, Florida man, and you will find some hideous crime that has occurred, and we found it was mostly true, except for Brandon, because he was born too recently in 1992. So nothing bad happened then.
That would still make him 28, which is fine.
Oh, sorry, 2002. I was going to say 1902, but that wouldn't work. But anyway,
that happened in Florida where siblings fell in love?
Oh my God. I was about to say, like, no, that has happened so many times in America. What happens is the daughter seems to find this biological parent, this biological dad. There have been multiple cases over the past 5 years that I have read in the news.
I've heard about this as well.
She finds the father, they fall in love, they then have children or try to have children, and then invariably, for whatever reason, like I'm not trying to sound dismissive, they end up murdering somebody. And like I can't even I can't.
This has absolutely escalated from
but I read
siblings sometimes fall in love.
No. This is not siblings. This is the
no,
daughter.
I know, yeah.
Finds
the daughter
dad,
and the dad.
And it's really like they never knew that they were related, but suddenly they go and murder the nurse next door.
I think I read one where it was like, he was working in the local video shop and they met and they just became friends. They didn't realize that he's her biological dad.
Oh no, sorry. In most of these cases that I read, is like they knew who they were.
Oh,
they knew who each other was, and like she goes to then live with him because she's trying to get to know her dad. Next thing you know, like
she really gets to know him. You mentioned that giving birth to Nash was severely traumatic, right? Why did you not stop after the one trauma?
Great question, Rosemary. So actually, I was just about to give you a comment on the exact same topic. And I was going to say, you know what? I realised after Chance was born, he's number 3, right? I held him and I walked around the house with him and I was like so enamoured by him. And I just remember saying to Don multiple times, I was like, oh my God, we actually made this baby for free. I was like, we actually created this thing out of nothing. He is amazing, and we created him, and he was amazing, and we should have another one. I think Don was like, you're nuts. You're acting nuts.
That sounds absolutely nuts.
Oh, yeah,
also, you'd already made 2 of these amazing things. Why did this only occur to you on number 3?
Because I think number 1, I was extremely depressed. Number 2, I was just like, I don't know that I'd had this.
You were shocked that you weren't depressed about it.
Probably, but I don't think I had the same feeling of bliss. I think I was like super delighted, but I'd also like to add that every single time I had a baby, I moved house and I moved state.
Well, I hate to sound like mum, but that was your decision.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rosemary. But I think played into something. I think it played into the stress level and,
Yeah, but also like, I mean, obviously if you had given birth to all of these children on your ranch in Nevada while your husband worked as a farmhand, you would have had time to focus solely on these children and your feelings about these children, whereas you were moving house and working and
Thanks,
moving
Rosemary.
house.
And you know what I'd like to say to Mom? I'd like to say to Mom, you know what, Mom? Yes, it was my choice. But was it my choice, Mom?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. She's not listening to the podcast anymore.
She is. Was it my choice to move for a job that was paying my salary? Was that my choice, or was that something I had to do?
Well, you could have stayed in the old job.
No, the other job, Rosemary, if you take on Vince Camuto, they let us all go.
Oh yeah.
So like the point is like, you don't always have that choice that Mom thinks you have. Like sometimes you have to do things because you have to do them. And I love the fact that Mom thinks you're like you have a job and then you're employed until you're dead. That's not actually.
Well, that's how it was in her day.
That's not life anymore. And I remember, and I would like to point out to listeners at home, that I remember when I was let go from Vince Camuto. So Vince Camuto is a footwear company in America, and I'm sure like lots of people are aware of it, but they have lots of licenses. They own like Tory Burch footwear, they own Lucky footwear, etc. And they opened a handbag division, and I was part of that handbag division. I was like the head of design, etc. And they were like super excited about it. And a year into it, they decided they were going to just shut it down. They didn't tell me this now, like just so you all know, this was a surprise to me too. And when I got a phone call, hey, can we meet tomorrow and like have, coffee in the morning? I was like, let me bring the muffins.
Oh, you mentioned this in another episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was like, no,
Will I bring the bagels?
Yes. It was like, no, you're being fired. So like, but the whole point is that like you get let go from these companies, you know, you don't necessarily have a say in it. And I remember I said to Mom, oh, I got let go. Mom calls me later. I told everybody's so sad for you. You got fired from that job. I was like, I didn't get fired, Mom. Like the entire department got let go. Mom's like, that's what I said. I told everyone you were fired. I was raging. Happy you're happy.
Oh, that's love. So I feel like you've probably fully terrified people.
Oh, sorry.
Out of the idea of having children.
I have a lot more terrifying stories.
Okay, no. We don't want any more terrifying stories.
Okay.
What I was going to ask was, what would you recommend, or what would you say to people to say, like, what are some positive things you can say about giving birth that aren't just like, you get a gorgeous baby?
Oh, no,
you know what I mean?
I think it's really important to understand when your doctor says, this is my plan for you and this is what we're going to do, that you understand, what does that mean? Like, what are my options within that plan, right? Like if you say to me, I'm going to be induced on November the 12th, do I have options? If you say to me, I'm going to, you know, when you go and you give birth and you're not induced, what are my options? Like, what should I do? What should I not do? What would you recommend? What have you seen as best case scenarios, worst case scenarios? Like, what would you think would be a great plan? Because I don't know that the doctor even thinks to have that conversation with you, right? Mm-hmm. So that's more what I would say is like, how can you engage your doctor in more of a conversation about, because I feel like they think that they're answering all your questions, but I don't.
But they've also done it hundreds of times, so for them it's a completely different.
I think most of the time they do not realize that you don't know what questions to ask. So I think I would say to them, what would you recommend? And I think I would actually say, I want to have a 45-minute meeting with you where I discuss this. It's outside of like an examination. Mm-hmm. Like I want to spend 45 minutes talking with you about what we should do when I give birth. If I give birth in A scenario, B scenario, or C scenario, what should it be? Like, and I really would have that conversation because I never had it. And I had to come to the conclusion myself. Mm. And it was so much more, like it was truly me at home going like, that was a disaster. Why?
Yeah, worrying.
That was a disaster. Why? Yeah. 100%.
I mean, I would really like to know people's experiences, whether they're in Ireland or not, with that kind of thing. Because I often feel like, so from my own experience going to the doctor in Ireland, right, not for necessarily maternity care, but there's often a sense that, okay, I have 11 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's the allocated time.
Yeah.
So like how does it work if you're seeing a consultant or you have a doctor and you're going for maternity appointments? Like, have you felt like you could ask for that time and you could take that time from your doctor to truly ask the questions and have them answered that you wanted, you know what I mean?
And I'd love to hear from people who are not just, because I think very often it's easy to tell the horror stories, which I even told myself tonight, like they're the easiest stories to tell, but like what are the stories that you felt were really productive towards like a better outcome? You know, like I really thought for myself that, you know, timing that inducement, like saying I want this to last 12 hours versus 1 hour, was,
and like I would never have known you could do that.
Yeah, but I mean, I didn't even think, I thought I could do it until I said, hey, I would prefer this, and they were like, no problem. You know, they just like delivered the drug more slowly, but that was never discussed to me as an option. So what would you think would be something that would be useful for people to know? You know, versus just a horror story.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm interested in the horror stories too.
Oh, like same, from a kind of a gory details. Tell me all the gory details.
But I would really like to know what would be helpful for people to know.
Yeah. I remember when our uncle got cancer, I remember our aunt telling me that one of the most shocking things that happened was that he began to lose his fingernails through chemo. And I remember being like, oh my God, I never knew that would happen. And she was saying, apparently it's a possibility that can happen, but nobody had ever told them. So when it started happening to him, he was like, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's so much to do with giving birth and being pregnant that people don't tell you. Even like stuff like the way your hair can really dramatically thin.
Oh my God, we didn't even talk
like
about
nobody
that.
tells you
We'll talk
that.
about again. Oh, my hair fell out. We'll talk about that separately. But not the first time, not the second time, the third time, unbelievably bald. and unbelievably straight. It went entirely straight. We'll talk about that separately.
Yeah. We have a whole thrilling episode coming up on our
we do.
Hashtag curly hair. What's it called? Curly girl method.
That's right.
Hashtag curly girl method or not. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any contributions, anonymous or otherwise, you can email us notwithoutmysis@gmail.com. You can message us on Instagram at notwithoutmysister. We have a website, notwithoutmysis.com, and we're both on Instagram. I'm at Rosemary McCabe and Beatrice is at Beatrice McCabe, both with an A in our Mac. And we also recognise that this is a topic that, like, there are so many different avenues we could go down, you know, talking about theoretically having children, raising children, you know, the whole, I don't know, just like there's so much about it. So we probably will come back to it and touch on it. And we may do a mini-sode or two reading out other people's experiences, because I feel like, I mean, I know our podcast a lot of the time is just us laughing at each other, but I feel like this is probably a topic that's worth giving a little bit more time and space to, and sharing people's stories, because I do feel like it would be really helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks
for listening. Recommend us to your friends if you like this,
and if you don't, keep quiet. Not Without My Sister is produced by Liam Garrity, sound and original music by Don Kirkland, and our original illustration is by Lindsay Nielsen.
You can find more great shows at thewarren.ie.